I'll never forget the way her voice sounded that day. It was trembling, but sharp. And the words cut deeper than anything I've ever heard in my life. "I'll never call you Dad again." It was my daughter's voice. The same little girl whose tiny hands once clung to mine when crossing the street, whose smile could light up even my darkest days, was now looking me dead in the eye and cutting me out of her world. And the worst part? It was my anniversary. Not just any anniversary, the day my wife and I had planned for weeks. There was supposed to be laughter, a family dinner, maybe a few old stories shared around the table. But instead, there was this, a sentence that dropped like a stone in my chest and left me unable to breathe. The air felt heavy. My mind started scrambling, reaching for answers. Was it something I'd said this morning? Was it a fight I didn't realize we had? I searched her face for a clue, but her eyes told me only one thing: she meant it. For a moment, I just stood there. I didn't say a word. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I didn't even understand why she said it. Was it something I'd done? Something I'd failed to do? A misunderstanding that had been building quietly until it finally exploded? You know how sometimes you replay a moment in your head over and over, trying to figure out what you should have said? Well, I've done that 100 times since that day. And yet, what I remember most vividly isn't my silence, but the look in her eyes. They weren't just angry, they were hurt. Deeply hurt. There's a certain kind of pain you see only in someone who feels betrayed by the person they thought they could always trust. That's what I saw staring back at me. She turned away before I could ask her why. And in that moment, 1,000 questions crashed into me. Every footstep she took away from me echoed in my chest. I wanted to run after her. I wanted to fix it immediately. But something inside told me I wouldn't be able to, not then. Not in that moment. And so, I sat down in the quiet, surrounded by the sound of nothing but my own heartbeat in my ears. It was slow at first, then faster, until it felt like it was pounding out of my chest. I didn't know it yet, but that day was about to take a turn I could never have predicted. Because hours later, when I least expected it, I would hear a verse, a single, powerful verse, that would bring me to my knees. It wasn't planned. It wasn't part of the service. And yet, it felt as if God Himself had orchestrated it, word for word, for me. But before I tell you that part, I need to take you back. Back to where this all began. Because a moment like this, it doesn't just happen out of nowhere. There's always a story behind the breaking point. And maybe, just maybe, hearing mine will make you think differently about the words we say to the people we love most. You know, people always tell you that time flies when your kids are little. But when you're in the middle of it, when you're changing diapers, chasing them around the living room, teaching them how to ride a bike, you don't think about time. You think about surviving the day. My daughter, Hannah, wasn't just my child, she was my buddy. When she was 5, we had a Saturday tradition: pancakes in the morning, cartoons until noon, then an adventure outside. Sometimes we go fishing, other times we just walk around the neighborhood, making up silly stories about the people we saw. She loved those days. I did too. I used to think we had the kind of bond that couldn't be broken. And maybe, that's why what happened on my anniversary hurt so much. But before we get there, you need to understand the day as it was supposed to go. It was a Friday in late spring. The kind of day where the sunlight feels warm, but there's still a gentle breeze that keeps you from sweating. My wife and I had planned a small dinner with just the family, nothing fancy, just good food and togetherness. Hannah had been quieter than usual all morning. I noticed it, but I brushed it off, thinking she might be tired from studying or maybe stressed about something with her friends. Over the past few months, there had been little signs that something was different between us. It wasn't big fights, more like distance. She didn't tell me about her day the way she used to. Sometimes, she'd stay in her room when I came home from work. When I'd ask if she wanted to go grab ice cream, she'd say she had homework. At first, I thought it was just teenage independence. I told myself, this is normal. She's growing up. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. There was one moment a few weeks before that keeps playing in my mind. I'd asked her to help me clean out the garage, something we used to do together while joking around. She gave me this look, like I'd just asked her to dig a ditch in the rain. She mumbled something about being busy and went back to her phone. That might sound small, but for me, it was like a little crack in the wall between us. Still, I believe love was stronger than distance. That's why I didn't worry too much about the anniversary. I thought, tonight will be good for us. We'll eat, we'll laugh, and maybe we'll feel close again. My wife had cooked her famous roast chicken, the one that fills the whole house with that rich, homey smell. The table was set, candles lit, soft music playing. It was exactly the kind of evening I wanted. Hannah came downstairs just as we were about to eat. She looked beautiful, my little girl growing into a young woman, but she had this heaviness about her. Her eyes didn't quite meet mine. We sat down. The conversation was light at first, my wife telling a story from work, me chiming in with a joke or two. But I could feel Hannah pulling further and further away with every passing minute. She pushed her food around on her plate, barely eating. I told myself I'd talk to her after dinner. That was the plan. But God must have known that night wasn't going to follow my plan. Because before dessert was even served, she said it. The words that would echo in my mind for months. I'll never call you Dad again. I don't even remember what led to it. A small disagreement? A misunderstood comment? The truth is, it doesn't matter. When someone you love says something like that, the reason becomes a blur. All you feel is the impact. And in that moment, I felt like I'd lost her. Not just for the night, but forever. Looking back, I think the tension between Hannah and me didn't explode in one night. It had been simmering for a long time, like water just under boiling, quiet but dangerous. You don't always hear it happening. You just look up one day, and it's steaming. It started with little things. She used to run to the door when I came home from work, hugging me so tight I could barely get my briefcase down. But lately, when I walked in, she barely looked up from her phone. She'd mumble hey without taking her eyes off the screen. We used to spend Sundays talking about church service on the drive home, what the pastor said, how it applied to our lives, but now, she'd pop in her earbuds and scroll through social media before I could even ask her opinion. At first, I convinced myself it was just part of growing up. I told myself, she's becoming independent. This is healthy. But in the quiet of the night, when I'd pass by her room and see her light still on, I'd wonder, why isn't she talking to me anymore? 2 weeks before my anniversary, we had our first real argument in months. It was over something small, the dishes. I had asked her to wash them before bed, and she said she'd do it later. When I came downstairs the next morning and saw the sink full, I lost my patience. I didn't yell, but my voice was sharper than it should have been. I said something like, Hannah, you can't just ignore things because you don't feel like doing them. She muttered something under her breath, I didn't even catch it, and walked away. It wasn't the words that hurt, it was the way she walked out like the conversation didn't matter at all. That was the first time I felt a wall go up between us. And I could feel it getting taller each week. Still, I told myself the anniversary would be different. It was supposed to be a night that reminded us we were a family, not just people living under the same roof. The weather even seemed to agree with me. It was a Friday in late spring. The sunlight was golden, the kind that makes everything look softer, gentler. My wife had spent the afternoon cooking her famous roast chicken, the one that fills the house with a smell so comforting it could melt away almost any bad mood. I dressed up a little, hoping to show I cared about the night. When I came downstairs, I saw my wife lighting candles on the table. Hannah hadn't appeared yet. Think she's coming down? I asked. She said she would, my wife replied, but her tone told me she'd noticed the same distance I had. Hannah came down a few minutes later. She looked beautiful, my little girl growing into a young woman, but there was a weight in her eyes that didn't belong on someone her age. She sat across from me, her phone in her hand until my wife quietly said, "No phones at the table." We started eating. The conversation was light at first, my wife telling a story from work, me throwing in a joke or two. But Hannah barely spoke. She pushed her food around her plate more than she ate it. I thought maybe I could draw her out with a little nostalgia. "Hannah," I said, smiling, "remember when you were little and tried to bake your own cake? You put salt instead of sugar." I laughed, remembering how she'd made a face after the first bite and declared it the worst cake in the history of cakes. But this time, she didn't laugh. She put her fork down, slowly, and said, "Why do you always have to bring up the past? Maybe I don't want to remember every single thing I did wrong." Her voice wasn't raised, but it was sharp. It hit me like cold water. "I didn't mean it like that," I said, my voice careful. "I was just, you never mean it, Dad. But you always do it. You think you know me, but you don't. Not anymore." The air went still. Even the soft music playing in the background suddenly felt too loud, like it was intruding. I tried again, quieter this time. "Sweetheart, I just wanted to," and then she said it. "I'll never call you Dad again." It was like someone had pressed pause on the whole world. My heart sank so fast I felt physically dizzy. She stood up, her chair scraping softly against the floor. She didn't look at me, didn't wait for me to respond. She just walked toward the stairs, each step slow but certain, like she had already decided something final in her mind. I sat there, staring at my plate. My wife reached for my hand, but I barely felt it. My ears were ringing. All I could think was, what just happened? And underneath that, another thought I couldn't shake, maybe this time, I can't fix it. I didn't move for a long time after she walked upstairs. It wasn't just shock, it was something heavier. Like the kind of weight you feel when you know a moment has changed something forever. My wife stayed quiet. She didn't try to comfort me with words, and I think she knew why. Sometimes, words only make the silence feel louder. I finally stood, my legs stiff, and walked toward the staircase. Halfway up, I hesitated. What was I going to say? "Hannah, you can't mean that. Hannah, let's talk. Hannah, I'm sorry." None of it felt right. I knocked gently on her door. No answer. I tried again, this time saying her name softly. "Hannah?" After a pause, her voice came through the door, muffled, but firm. "I don't want to talk to you right now." I should have respected that. I should have given her space. But my heart couldn't accept the idea of leading things like that. So I said, "Please, I just need to know what I did." Her reply was colder this time. "It doesn't matter. You'll just say you didn't mean it. You always do." That hit me like a punch to the chest. Was that really how she saw me? As someone who hurt her and then brushed it off? I pressed my forehead against the door, wishing it could magically open the wall between us. But after a few moments of silence, I heard her footsteps, moving away from the door, and I knew the conversation was over before it started. I walked back downstairs, the warmth from the candles now feeling almost mocking. The cake on the table sat untouched. My wife quietly began clearing the plates, and I went to sit on the couch. That's when it really hit me. The ache wasn't just in my chest, it was everywhere. It was in my hands that used to hold hers. In my ears that used to hear her call me Dad with pride. In my heart that felt like it was shrinking with every breath. And in that moment, I prayed. Not a polished, well-structured prayer. Just a desperate whisper. "God, please don't let this be the end of us." I stayed on the couch for what felt like hours. Every clock tick seemed to echo in the quiet house. The laughter I had imagined for our anniversary night had been replaced with a silence so heavy I could almost hear my own heart breaking. I picked up my phone a few times, thinking about texting her, even though she was just upstairs. But what would I say? "I'm sorry?" That felt too small. "I love you?" Of course I did, but I'd told her that 1,000 times, and somehow it wasn't enough to keep us from ending up here. Finally, I just leaned forward, elbows on my knees, and buried my face in my hands. That's when it hit me, the kind of sob that doesn't just come from sadness, but from loss. The kind you can't swallow down, no matter how hard you try. My wife sat beside me quietly, her hand rubbing my back, but I barely noticed. I felt like I was somewhere else, somewhere between the past and the future, and I wasn't sure if the bridge between them had just collapsed. I thought about the first time Hannah called me Dad. She was just learning to talk, and she had this little lisp. The way she said it, "da," had melted me completely. And now, she had just taken that word away from me. The grief of that moment wasn't just about a word, it was about what the word meant. Dad was more than a title. It was trust. It was safety. It was the invisible thread that connected us. And now, it felt like that thread had been cut clean through. I didn't realize I was crying until I felt the warmth of the tears on my hands. I didn't even try to stop. I just whispered again, "God, please. Please help me." And in that raw, broken place, I felt something I couldn't explain, not comfort, not peace, but a pull. A pull that told me I needed to be somewhere else the next morning. I didn't know why at the time, but I would soon find out. By the time the final hymn ended, my hands were trembling. Not from nerves, from urgency. I felt like God had just handed me a lifeline, and I couldn't waste another second. On the drive home, my wife was quiet. I think she knew something had shifted in me, because she didn't ask questions. She just reached over, placed her hand on mine, and gave it a small squeeze. When we pulled into the driveway, I saw Hannah's bedroom window. The blinds were half closed, just enough for a sliver of sunlight to cut across the glass. For a moment, I froze. What if she didn't want to hear me? What if she turned me away again? But the verse kept echoing in my head. Be kind, tender-hearted, forgiving. I walked up the stairs slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. When I reached her door, I knocked once, gently, like I was afraid it might break. There was a pause. Then her voice, "Yeah?" It wasn't warm, but it wasn't shut down either. That tiny difference was enough to give me hope. I took a deep breath. "Hannah, can I talk to you for a minute?" Another pause. Then, "Okay." I opened the door to find her sitting on the edge of her bed, knees pulled up, hair falling into her face. She looked tired, not just physically, but in a way I recognized all too well. For a second, I almost lost my words. But then I remembered the pastor's voice, steady and sure, reading that verse like it was meant for me. I stepped inside, closed the door behind me, and said, before I say anything else, "I just want you to know that I'm sorry. For every time I made you feel like I wasn't listening. For every time I made you feel like I saw your mistakes more than your heart. And for not noticing sooner that something was hurting you." Her eyes stayed down, but I could see her shoulders shift, the smallest sign that my words had reached her. "I don't want to lose the right to be your dad," I said, my voice breaking. "But even if you don't call me that anymore, I'll still love you. Always." For the first time in days, she looked at me. And in that look, I saw the smallest flicker of something I hadn't seen in a long time. Not forgiveness yet, but the door cracking open. That's where the real work would begin. For a long moment, we just sat there, me on the edge of her desk chair, her on the bed. It wasn't silence like the night before. This was softer. Waiting. Finally, she said, "You don't get it, Dad. It's not just about the cake thing, or what you say sometimes, it's that I don't feel like you see me anymore. Not the real me." Her voice cracked on that last part, and it felt like someone had just pressed a key in my heart that hadn't been touched in years. I swallowed hard. "Then help me see you again. Tell me who you are now, and I promise I'll listen." She looked down at her hands, fidgeting with the edge of her sweater. And then, slowly, she began to talk. Not about big, dramatic events, but about the little things I'd missed. How she'd been struggling with a group of friends at school. How a teacher's harsh comment had made her doubt herself. How sometimes, when I teased about things from her childhood, it didn't feel like love, it felt like I was saying she hadn't changed. Every word was like a light turning on in a dark room I didn't know existed. When she finished, I said, "Hannah, I didn't realize. I thought I was holding on to memories we both loved. I didn't know they felt heavy to you." She gave a little shrug, like she didn't know how to respond. But then she said something I'll never forget. "I don't want to stop calling you Dad. I just need you to be this version of you more. The one who's listening right now." That's when I felt it, the moment God answered the prayer I'd whispered on the couch the night before. Not in the way I expected, not with instant perfection, but with a chance. A second chance. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she leaned toward me and let me hold her. It wasn't the same as when she was little. It was better, because it was a choice. That evening, as the sun dipped low and poured gold light through the living room window, I thought about the verse again: be kind, tender-hearted, forgiving. It didn't just save my relationship with my daughter. It changed me. Because kindness isn't a weakness, it's a strength you choose every day. Being tender-hearted doesn't mean being soft in the wrong ways, it means letting love win over pride. And forgiveness is the bridge God builds when we've burned all the others. If you're a parent listening to this right now, or maybe a son or daughter who's been carrying hurt, I want to tell you something: don't wait. Don't wait until the silence grows so loud you can't hear each other anymore. Go knock on that door. Go have that conversation. Even if it's messy. Even if it's scary. Because I almost lost the most important title I've ever had. And by God's grace, I got another chance to keep it. If this story touched you, I hope you'll share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you want more stories like this, stories about faith, love, and second chances, make sure you subscribe and click the like button. It helps us keep telling them, and maybe, just maybe, it helps someone else find their way back to the people they love.